Hi, my name is Shane. I run the events over at TEN Capital, and we have another great pitch event today. We have 4 amazing companies and 2 amazing panelists as well, who we'll get to in just a minute. If you have any questions in the audience during the session, you can go ahead and put those in our chat box, which is open. And we will be running polls for the audience as well after each presentation. So be on the lookout for that. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to our CEO, Hall Martin, to get our panelists introduced.
Great. Thanks, Shane. I want to thank everybody for joining us today and want to have our panelists introduce themselves first. First up is Katie Russel of the Central Texas Angel Network. Katie, can you tell us more about the group and your role there?
Yeah, Hal, thank you so much for having me. As Hal said, my name is Katie. I'm the executive director at Central Texas Angel Network. We're one of the largest and most active angel networks in the country. Since inception, which was in 2006, we've invested over $125 million into 208 companies and have had 52 exits. We look for companies across B2B, B2C, consumer, hardware, and life sciences. We tend to look at seed stage companies. We're on a break right now from a funding cycle, but we typically have 6 funding cycles per year, and our next one is at the end of August. So if you think you fit one of these categories, definitely apply. It's a great time to get your application in. Other than that, I think that's it from my end. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me at katie@ctan.com, or you can go on our website and find more information at ctan.com. Thanks so much, and good luck with your pitches tonight.
Great. Thanks, Katie. And our other investor on the panel is Yoko Okano, First Row Partners. Yoko, can you tell us more about your fund and what you do there?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Hal, super excited to be here. I'm one of the founding partners of First Row Partners. We're based in Seattle, and we are a pre-seed specialist fund. We mostly invest in North American companies. And, we really believe that in sort of the AI-enabled world that we're all living in today, people are going to be the drivers of opportunities. So we invest in marketplaces, B2B SaaS, and purpose-built AI companies that really power the builders, the brand builders, the makers, and teachers that are creating our unique world. So we have 20 investments to date, and Fund 1 is we're on the tail end of Fund 1. We're doing which is doing well, and so we'll be kind of gearing up for Fund 2 in the near term. So we also do a ton of education and community work in the venture community here in Seattle. And one of the things that I would love to invite anyone on the call here to is something called Deals and Drinks. It's a regular event where we help everyone, all participants, really understand and hone their investor perspective. So it's great for founders, especially first-time entrepreneurs who just kind of want to know what happens when the door closes behind them. And funny enough, we start where we think all startup events should start, and it's by looking at a piece of art. So we really try to use various methods to kind of open our minds to new possibilities. So if that's of interest, please do reach out. And yeah, super excited to be here.
Great, thanks. So with that, let's go and kick off with our first presenter. Each presenter will have 15 minutes to present and answer questions. The questions will come primarily from those on the panel here, those in the audience. If you have questions, go ahead and post them in. If we have an opportunity to answer them, we will. If not, we'll follow up afterwards with the answers. So with that, let's bring on Vicky Farrar of Lightline Medical. Vicky, if you go ahead and turn on your slides, we'll get the timer going and we'll kick off. And looking forward to next steps.
I'm Vicky Farrar, the CEO of Lightline Medical. We're raising a $6 million Series A, of which 1.4 remains available. Question for everybody here. Are you afraid to go to the hospital? You should be. Hospital-acquired infections are a huge international problem. In the US alone, they cost $50 billion annually and 100,000 deaths. Most of these events are never events. They should never happen, and therefore they're never going to be reimbursed. On top of the lack of reimbursement, however, are staggering Medicare penalties in the hundreds of millions of dollars. More than 40% of these infections are catheter-related. So do we care? Are catheters a big deal? Yes, they're one of the best medical miracles of the century, and infections limit their use, limiting care. Why can't the world fix the problem? Here's why. As antibiotic-resistant organisms are on the rise, the drugs to combat them are on the decline. Fact, antibiotic resistance is the 3rd leading cause of death worldwide. We have the solution. It's called the Lightline Photo Disinfection System. We're using visible light, that's light that the human eye can see. Significantly, it's not harmful UV light. The technology consists of two components, a reusable light engine attached to an off-the-shelf catheter. Inside the catheter is a fiber optic that emits light inside and outside the catheter, disinfecting it and thereby preventing infection. This is a potent solution for all types of catheters. It's patented and there is no antibiotic resistance issue. The device works. We have successfully killed the microorganisms that cause these infections and exceeded FDA's required 99.99% kill rate for an antimicrobial claim. First, the technology is going in a peritoneal dialysis catheter for several reasons. It's generally understood that peritoneal dialysis done in the home is better for the patient clinically and their quality of life than hemodialysis done in a clinic several hours at a time, several days a week. Then how come in the United States, 89% of the population is on hemodialysis? Here's why. Scared to death of getting an infection, and we can fix that. But the second reason this is our first product is that we're putting the fiber optic in a portion of the catheter here, which is where over 90% of the infections arise. As a result of it being outside the body and not touching human tissue, we don't need to do animal or clinical trials, so we have a straightforward 510(k) pathway. Our device fits seamlessly within the dialysis patient's workflow. So they start doing what they usually do to prep for their exchanges, and then they do four things. They take our light engine and they turn it on in the back. They take this cable, plug it in to make sure it works. It'll turn green if it does. Then they attach it to the extension set that you saw in the last slide, and then they push the start treatment button. And they do this while they're already doing the drain, something they have to do anyway. Then the light engine will automatically go off and they continue their treatment. It's a huge market. Total addressable market is close to $10 billion. We estimate by 2033, we'll have over $500 million in revenue, or 17% of the population. But next is the Holy Grail. We put the technology in a Foley or urinary catheter to prevent catheter-associated urinary tract infections. These are the most common infections in the world, not just the United States. This too is a 510(k), but it's a de novo 510(k), so that's why it's product number 2. This too is a huge market. There are over 100 million Foley catheters sold worldwide. We have a partnership distribution strategy. We want to rely on a partner's existing market penetration. And here we have that partnership with Medline Industries, the largest private distributor in North America. We estimate that by 2033, our share of the market will be over $400 million, or 6%. We estimate 10 years post-launch revenues for all 4 fields of use at over $1.7 billion. And here's how we make money. For peritoneal dialysis, we give away the light engine for free, or we charge a small amount for it. It's a razor blade model. We charge for the disposable fiber optic $70 a week, and it needs to be replaced once a week. For all other indications, we charge for both the capital equipment and the fiber optic, but they only need one fiber optic per catheter. Competition. Only visible light does it all. We kill established biofilm, kill drug-resistant microbes, can be used long-term, and are safe for material. But why? Why would anybody buy our products? It's because we have a strong value proposition for everyone. Patient doesn't get an infection, caregiver isn't treating it, hospitals aren't penalized, and insurance companies aren't paying for it. How do we know we can get the products on the market? We've all done it before. I have deep intellectual property experience and sold my last infection control company, Catheter Connections, to Merit Medical. Merit put $1 million in Lightline. My co-founder at Catheter Connections, Bob Hitchcock, is our chief technology officer. He's been putting products on the market for decades. Our CFO, Kristen Taylor, has 30 plus years of experience. And Kelly Powers, recently retired from CR Bard and Bard Access. He has put over 100 medical devices on the market with revenues exceeding $15 billion. Here's where we are. We're raising a Series A of $6 million, of which 1.4 million remains. Pre-money valuation, 18 million, price per share, 69 cents, and warrant coverage, 8%. We're using all of the Series A funds to do everything we need to do in order to file our 510(k) for our first peritoneal dialysis product. We will then raise a $10 million Series B with an increased valuation, and that money will be used to commercialize the peritoneal dialysis product and to develop and launch the urinary product. Our progress to date. Our data is conclusive. We have done 50 plus in vitro studies. We've done 2 animal studies. We've done GLP lab studies. We have been testing the product for FDA required testing and are continuing to do that. We've done human factor studies and are continuing to do that. And we have 2 peer-reviewed journal articles. Secret sauce is the IP. While you can't patent visible light because it's a natural phenomena, what we have patented is the method of delivery. We have 30 issued patents, 19 pending. We have written freedom to operate opinions, and we own the IP free and clear. Now, it's not the number of patents that are so important. It's that multiple examiners all over the world have found our technology novel. I talked about the Medline partnership. I'm going to get to Mayo in a minute. We've won lots of grants and awards, and we've raised $10 million to date. The Mayo agreement is very significant to us. We have licensed their know-how in all 4 of our fields of use. We meet with a nephrologist once a week to get our peritoneal dialysis product right for their patients and other PD patients. We have access to all their facilities. We secured funding from them in September 2022, and they negotiated best price. And here's what that means. It means that Mayo will be an early adopter and a catalyst for others to adopt our product. Snapshot. As I mentioned, we're using all of Series A to do everything we need to do to file our 510K. There will then be an increase in valuation. We launch the PD product, raise the Series B, and then launch Foley and endotracheal. Now, you do not see vascular on here, and that's because we are so confident that we will be sold before we get to vascular. But that being said, we are in confidential discussions with 2 public companies for our vascular technology. The point of this slide, it's not that these are the entities that are going to buy us. It's that we've got 8 potential exits. We have 4 fields of use, and we could do a deal internationally or domestically in each. Example, Fresenius is a dialysis company. Fresenius is only going to be interested in dialysis. Teleflex may be interested in everything. Bard BD and Merit may be interested in selected indications in selected geographic areas. While I just showed you what 8 exits may be, here we've modeled 1 exit 4 years post-launch. Typically, a medical device company sells for 3 to 5 times revenue. I sold my last infection control company for 5 times revenue. Here, we estimate that 4 years post-launch will be around $400 million in revenue. That would give you an exit valuation of $1.1 to $2 billion and a hefty Series A return of 32 to 54 times. So, we are now within reach of getting our 510K clearance, and with an investment, we can successfully eliminate antibiotic-resistant infections, save millions of lives, billions of dollars, launch by the second quarter of 2022, have extraordinary revenues, and deliver an extraordinary return. So we want anybody listening to this interested to join Mayo, Merit, Medline, Kaiser Doctors, Angel MD, and 5 chapters of Keiretsu and do a deep dive into our diligence room. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Vicki. And Katie, why don't you go first with your first question?
Yeah, and Vicki, good to see you again.
Hello.
We just went through the CTN process, so I've heard this a couple times, but so I'll just ask one question and then let Yoko take over. But I missed what you said, the number or the percentage of infections that are caused from catheters in the hospital. And then you had also briefly touched on at-home use. Are you thinking this is more important for at-home use when people are applying them themselves, or it's better for hospital use?
Okay, so that's a good question. It depends on which indication we're talking about. So 40% of hospital-acquired infections are catheter-related. That includes those in the home and those in the hospital, nursing homes, et cetera. What we're doing for our first product, peritoneal dialysis, is a home product. You do it in a clinic, sometimes you do it in a hospital, sometimes, but it's really, really a home product. All of our other products, though, are really hospital products. Okay, they will be sold to the hospitals. And that's why the 2 different indications are also why we have different economic models for each.
And you're starting with the at-home product.
We're starting with the at-home peritoneal dialysis product, and peritoneal dialysis is being financially incentivized right now by the federal government pursuant to executive orders and Medicare. There is a huge, huge push, in part caused by COVID, to get people off of hemodialysis, which people really don't like, and get them on peritoneal dialysis. Peritoneal dialysis is $15,000 cheaper per year per patient, and yet the provider gets the exact same bundled or composite reimbursement.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks so much for a great presentation, Vicki. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there. I don't do a ton of medical device investments, so just kind of use that as a grain of salt in terms of the ignorant questions I will likely ask you. To kind of continue on the thread that sort of Katie started for me for the PD use at home. You mentioned at the very end that you were doing some sort of human testing and studies.
Sure.
What sort of usability studies have you done around, patient at home doing the whole, because no one's trained for this until they have to. So walk me through sort of the training or the testing you've done there.
So we do 3 sets of usability studies. One was completed a year ago at Atlantic Dialysis in New York City, which is a huge dialysis clinic, very prestigious, et cetera. And what we do is it's a simulated use study. We have our light engine there. We have a mannequin that has the peritoneal dialysis catheter in it. They have our instructions for use. They have a PowerPoint. They have a video. We see, can they do this? How easy is it? Can they follow it? And based upon what happened a year ago, we made significant changes. Nobody knew what RFID was. My husband's older. I came home and asked him what he knew. Would he know what it is? And it didn't. We took RFID out. We took the light engine out. I'm sorry, not the light engine. We took the battery out. We redesigned the front of the box so that these LED lights sequentially will guide the patient. They will know exactly what to do when, even if they discard our IFUs. Now we are preparing to do pre-formative and then summative studies. So 2 more studies required by FDA, same thing, but now they're going to have the product that's been refined and is really the final product. But again, we have the same materials. Mayo has helped us significantly with our instructions for use and the design of the product, et cetera. And they've talked to their patients and their doctors and their nurses, et cetera. So we will be talking now to 26 nurses and 26 patients and submit that to FDA.
Gotcha. And then you kind of mentioned the Mayo Clinic, and another question I had written down is just around that partnership. And it's fantastic they're an early adopter. I can see how they're really great sort of catalyst for a lot of things. How have you seen a partnership like that work for other devices or other things coming to market?
Oh, I think here's what Mayo told us when we went to them, and it was a long journey, but we got it. Okay, so what Mayo said is, if our doctors like what you have and they want it for their patients, then we talk about a deal. So they took our clinical slide deck, not investment deck, and clinical executive summary and sent it out to their doctors, including nephrologists. And they came back and they liked it. And that's why they did a deal with us. And I believe that it is pretty similar for other devices and other types of technology.
So we've done a little bit of kind of pre-selling internally.
Sorry,
did you have more questions?
No, I'm sorry.
Katie, did you have more questions? I can always keep going.
No, keep going, Yoko.
Awesome.
Got 46 seconds left.
Perfect. Well, Vicki, given your depth of experience, I'm sort of curious, like, what are the miracles that need to happen? You have so many things mapped out. What are the things that you're, that maybe worry you a little bit in terms of like, your confidence piece on the plan?
Okay, so none of it's IP, none of it's technology. Technology works, we got the IP space, totally fine. We have a distribution agreement for our urinary product with Medline. We do not have that agreement yet with the peritoneal dialysis big boys. We've talked to them all, they're watching us. That's the thing. We do have a plan B about direct sales that will then get the attention of the big boys. But that's the one thing. If I could have that now, and have their input on the design and integrate this into their cyclers, their night machines, et cetera, that would be ideal. So that's a very good question.
Great. Well, that comes to the end of our time. Thanks, Vicki, for a great presentation. And with that, let's move to our next presenter, Ping Ye, Voxy Health. Let's go ahead and have you load up your slides and we'll kick off with the next one. Again, in the audience, if you'd like to post questions, please do so, and we'll see what we can do to answer those as well. Ping, go ahead.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Ping Ye, CEO of Voxy Health. Voxy is extracting insights and intelligence from volatile organic compounds, which are chemicals that we exhale every moment of our lives. So our vision is to save millions of lives, one loved one at a time, through early disease detection. This is a non-invasive breath test that takes about a minute. Our mission is to make the most approachable, accessible, and accurate breath diagnostic in the world. There are 26 granted patents on this technology. It's been in development for nearly a decade. A lot of money has been put in to get to this point. There's been 3 clinical studies, and the team is quite experienced, which I'll get to near the end. We're raising $5 million in a safe. We're a little over 80% filled, and our use of proceeds are to commercialize the patented breath diagnostic test. We have an initial strategic partner, Auna. They have about 650,000 high-risk lung cancer patients in Latin America, and we're really excited about that developing partnership. Some of our differentiators, to hit the highlights before I go into the slides, are that it is way better for stage 1 accuracy. It's a lot smaller than existing diagnostic tests, whether it's with blood or breath. It's significantly lower in cost and much faster because it is point of care. One quick update for investors. Just today, actually, we were told we were approved for the Minnesota Angel Tax Credit, which you can receive 25% of your invested capital back a year later. So just moving things along, 84% of lung cancer are diagnosed late. As you can see, some of the statistics here are very probably known by many of you, but really identifying disease early really gives the optionality for improved survival in 5 years, as you can see with those numbers. And of course, it's a massive drain on the US economy and of course the families affected by cancer. With regards to the global challenge of cancer, I think we've all probably been touched with cancer. I myself have been touched by cancer. I'm actually a survivor of Hodgkin's lymphoma. But it took 6 months for me to figure out what was going on in my body, and it would have been much easier to breathe on something for 1 minute rather than figuring it out over the course of nearly half a year. But cancer diagnostics is growing like crazy, and it will grow into a $250 billion industry by 2028. Now, what's really interesting about what we want to bring is really want to open the funnel for those to be tested early. So unfortunately, symptomatic diagnosis for symptoms, unfortunately, is often a late stage diagnosis, but early and high frequency testing can catch the stages of cancer at a stage where there's most optionality in terms of treatment. So what's it look like? I've got one I'm holding one in my hand right here. This is a simple non-invasive test. We can extract a bunch of analysis and data from a 1 minute. It's about 10 megabytes of information. And from that, we're able to extract insights and impact patients by identifying, if they have a presence of cancer. In our case, we're focusing on lung cancer first. But after that, you can focus on surveillance, monitoring, and eventually screening. So we did not invent volatile organic compounds. It's been studied for decades. The diagram on the right shows all the different ways VOCs have been studied over the years. What we look at are multiple different breath prints can represent multiple diseases. So different patterns can relate to different diseases, or within a disease, different stages, or even subtypes of a particular disease. So there are multiple applications, not just only in cancer, but also in infectious diseases, age-related diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. They all have a unique volatile organic compound, or people do, when that disease occurs in the body. So this one chart really got me excited when the team at Boston Scientific, who has been developing this for quite some time, showed this to me. And here you can see that about 33 different VOCs that are expelled from the breath actually shift in unique ways in abundance percentage or concentration in the breath when someone has lung cancer versus healthy. And 9 new VOCs are produced when one has cancer. And so this is a device that is able to pick up all these changes. Now one of the ways why it's important for individuals is we help answer some of these major questions when someone may have cancer. Am I cancer-free? Are nodules cancerous is what we're focused on first. So nodules that are identified on X-ray or CT scan or PET scan, we can help identify if they're cancerous or not. And about a third of the time, biopsies are done and it's not cancerous. And so early on, when our CTO was working with Mayo Clinic, that was really one of the major issues that they had, the major unmet need that they had brought to our attention, which is why after years, this is what was created from those discussions. So what does it look like now? Well, we have two form factors, the desktop form factor and the handheld breathalyzer. The way it works, or the secret sauce, is that on top of a nanocircuit, we have a single layer of carbon, otherwise known as graphene. And on top of that, they spent years figuring out how to scale up a way to put a self-assembled monolayer of chemistry on top of that graphene, so that when unique chemistries from the breath flow over the surface of these sensors, there is a shift in electrical response, and in our case, capacitance. And that's what a lot of the patents are on. So we pick up a full spectrum of these chemicals to enable accessible, accurate, and an approachable device. So just to share a little bit how it might work for you, we have an example here of lung cancer, and different cell types produce different VOC patterns. And our chips, and there's 40 of them, each pick up 40 unique families of chemical receptors. And so different chemicals interact with these sensors in unique ways, which is how we get our patterns. In our most recent study that ended in Q1, you can see the sensitivity and specificity numbers on the right side. Stage 1 accuracy is already quite significantly better than liquid biopsy. For example, GRAIL is under 20% sensitivity. We're already showing in the mid-80s. And I think as we increase our sample size and work with Auna, for example, these accuracy numbers will go up. We've already been able to show actually very clearly how patterns can give us confidence in terms of seeing the difference between patterns. Our p-values are extremely good at 0.0001 for those that remember that from statistics. So just to hammer it home, one of the really cool things about this technology is that it actually wasn't focused on lung cancer. It was to measure the whole full spectrum volatile organic compounds that are related to disease. So this one platform can detect multiple diseases, so we don't have to change the hardware at all as we move from one disease to the next. From a competition standpoint, Voxy is non-invasive. It can be performed anywhere. There's no lab, there's no data loss in terms of ionization. It literally is a point of care. So the breath hits our sensor. We don't have to remove the moisture, fill it into columns, send it into a lab, any of that. Given the time, I'll just quickly share that this is kind of like a mass spectrometer, but in the palm of your hand. Everybody else in the breath space basically has some kind of spectrometer, a large microwave-sized device that's $500,000. This essentially is an extremely low-cost device that can be one-time use or multiple uses depending on the setting. Again, 26 granted patents. I can go into that later. And like before, there's tremendous alignment between providers, patients, and payers in terms of why this device makes sense, whether it's fee-for-service or value-based care organizations. In terms of our path to commercialization, we have our lab-developed tests and the value-based health system that we're working with, Auna, with 650,000 high-risk lung cancer patients. They actually screen them every year. This would be a transformative technology for them, not just for lung cancer, but other cancers that they deal with. We can drive early revenue. We have been talking to the government and Department of Defense. You can imagine the applications specifically to our military and veterans and strategic partners like ACO organizations. FDA pathway, this is a de novo pathway. There's no predicate for us. And we can imagine that FDA begins in the second half of next year. From a reimbursement standpoint, we are investigating that PLA codes is likely a really quick way to get a reimbursement code prior to the FDA approval. So the team. So this is my second company. I actually started my career in tech, and then my experience with cancer really transitioned me into the world of health. So the last 10 years I've been in the world of health. Our team actually has been doing this for decades. So we have over 100 years of experience. They've done dozens of devices to market in the medical space. It's a phenomenal team from Boston Scientific. I'll highlight Greg Sherwood, who was a senior fellow there, Rhea Finch, our chief of product, who's been working on this for years, and Randy Schistel was the global head of all of R&D for Boston Scientific, and he just joined us a month ago. He's been working on this for years, but he transitioned to us just a few weeks ago. We'll be raising 5 million. We're over 80% on the goal. And again, commercialize the desktop with strategic partners, and then we'll transition to the smaller breathalyzer, and then to launch the LDT format to drive data, algorithm development, and early revenue. And then, like before, we also have exit opportunities. You can imagine there are tremendous companies that would be interested in this, given the impact it could have as a platform, and they cross healthcare providers, consumer health companies, tech companies, retail, and medical device. So there's a lot of exit opportunities, especially after we knock off 1 to 2 FDA approvals. And I will pause there. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ping. Yoko, what's your first question?
Sure. Thanks so much for the presentation, Ping. And I'm sort of curious about sort of the product. I was a little bit confused maybe with some of the pictures. It has an easy use. I could probably use it at home, but my sense is that can you walk me through the patient experience? Is it for use in the medical office? Early detection is key, but how would my doctor sort of know to maybe, hey, let's do this? Is this a one-time a year thing, kind of like a pap smear, right? Like, tell me a little bit about how you see the patient experience look.
Yeah, we were just talking to our medical advisor at UC San Diego. And so oftentimes individuals, there's a couple different use cases. The one is someone is high risk for lung cancer. So they would basically peel and open up this device, because the sensors have to be sealed initially. So we pull it open, kind of like when you release a battery for the first time, and then it'll be connected to a tablet. And then that tablet will walk the person and the clinician through how the person breathes through for that 1 minute. And then that data, it gets sent to the cloud and gets analyzed, and then back to the physician instead of a web portal. So they'll follow the directions. They'll follow the directions. Yeah, we're in the process of pulling all that together. By the end of this year, we'll have the end-to-end process done.
Is that an opportunity that you'll be able to do sort of test out with the ONA partnership? Obviously you have the high risk patients, but I imagine they're sort of their families may be within the high risk category. Like, are you thinking about doing any testing with them?
Yeah, so the first area that we're going to focus on actually are those with identified nodules. So one of the big travesties actually is that people with nodules smaller than 8 millimeters, you're under basically a wait and see. As a cancer survivor, being under a wait and see isn't really the best mindset to be. Oh, we'll just wait and see if it grows into metastatic cancer. It's not really the state you want to be in. So what we want to do here is we want to test those not only that are 8 millimeters and greater to capture the value of the 30% of the time where it's not cancerous, because a biopsy is actually pretty invasive, but also to work with the range between 6 and 8 millimeters, because within 6 to 8 millimeters, you're also kind of in a wait and see or come back in a year, or in low risk situations, it's just wait and see. This we can do at any nodule size. And in particular, we want to focus on the 6 to 8 in our clinical trials, because we can then have a gold standard of, if it does grow, we can compare the results of our breathalyzer versus the results of the actual biopsy. But yeah, I think that's where the first use case will be for those with identified nodules. And then later on, we could do general screening for those that are just high risk, whether it's like someone who smoked, or it could be secondhand smoke, which is actually a huge number. I think I showed that on one of the first slides. It's like 85 million.
Katie, what's your question?
Yeah, I know we don't have too much time, but I have a lot of questions. So I'll probably have.
I'll reach out to you, Katie.
Separate time thing. Yeah, reach out to me. I think this is something that CTN would really get a kick out of.
Cool.
So definitely reach out. But quick question: what's the cap?
Oh, on the safe, it's a 20% post money cap.
Okay, but what's the valuation?
Oh, since we're raising 5 million, one could imagine it's around 15 if we max out that cap. Yeah, but if it's less than that, then you get a 20% discount. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Great
Thanks,
question.
guys.
I'll reach out, Katie. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Our next presenter is James Blackledge of Capella Imaging. James, if you'd like to go ahead and share your slides, we'll kick off here when you're ready.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate the attention. I'm Jim Blackledge. I'm one of the founders of Capella Imaging. We're a clinical stage company located here in St. Louis, Missouri, that is focused on developing nuclear diagnostic imaging agents. We focus on unmet clinical needs. The team that founded this company has collectively got over 100 years of experience in a combination of both drug development and cardiology. And the lead candidate that we're working on right now is a fibrin-targeted imaging agent, which we call Fibricent, which is for assessing thrombus associated with various cardiac, prosthetic, and support devices. So what is the problem we're trying to address here? Heart disease is responsible for about 20% of the deaths in the US, 18% worldwide, but that jumps to 20% in the US for a lot of reasons that aren't relevant here. But a lot of these patients are fitted with mechanical support devices. And in some cases, it's because the heart is failing so badly that it has to be replaced. And there's typically only about 2,500 donor hearts available in any given year, and that number has been stagnant for a long time. If you need a heart transplant, the numbers aren't in your favor, and there's anywhere from 10 to 15-fold more people that need heart transplants. So a lot of them are fitted with these so-called ventricular assist devices, or else in some cases you get prosthetic valves that are addressing failing heart valves. But all of these devices are suffering from a common risk, and that is thrombus or blood clot. They develop blood clots, which can cause mechanical interference in the function of the device itself, or on some level, even more of a scarier risk is the idea of stroke. If your heart develops a clot, it's a short trip to the brain, and that's just not a good situation to be in. Most of these devices, you have to be treated with heavy anticoagulants to prevent this formation of blood clot. And as a result of that, especially patients that have ventricular assist devices, they suffer from a lot of risk of gastrointestinal bleeding. At least a third of them are going to be hospitalized for extended stays to treat that. At present, there are really no tools on the market for helping address these issues. In the case of prosthetic valves, for looking at clotting, there are tools, but the physicians that do this work tell us they aren't ideal. In fact, it was actually physicians at the Washington University Medical School that approached us about the heart valve indication. They use things, various forms of echocardiography to diagnose these, but none of them actually give a solid diagnosis. They just are suggestive. And they're not able to distinguish between thrombus, which is a blood clot, and pannus, which is just sort of a fibrous growth of tissue. Both of these are problems with valves. We can distinguish between the two of them. In the case of LVADs, there is no diagnostic tool. There's a completely unmet need at this point. And so we think fibrin could be the tool to answer these questions. So I'm a little bit of a disadvantage in showing you my product, because my product is a molecule, but this is a cartoon image of it here. It's a tetramer. Each of these arms are composed of a repeating unit of polyethylene glycol, and they're terminated with two peptides. One peptide binds radioactive technetium, which is what we use for the imaging. The other peptide is what we use for binding to fibrin, which is a part of blood clots. And so what you see on the far right here, this rotating image, this is an LVAD, a left ventricular assist device, which is one of our initial indications. It's essentially a pump that is implanted to support someone whose heart is failing. And this has been removed from a human patient and implanted in the 70-kilogram calf, which is our model system. We've treated the calf with Fibricent, and the very bright spot at the bottom that you see rotating, that neck has just been coated with a blood clot. And so this patient was at a severe risk of some of this breaking off and causing a potential stroke, a pulmonary embolism, all the sorts of things, the bad and ugly things that we associate with blood clots. And again, this is a titanium pump. So there are no other imaging modalities available that can actually see through this. And the fact that the titanium pump is there eliminates all other typical imaging modalities. So there's a significant market here. Typically on the order of 180, it's actually more like 182,000 prosthetic valves are implanted annually in the US. These are just US numbers. And that's growing at about 6.5% annually. About 6,200 patients fitted with LVADs. We've picked a pretty conservative dose cost of $1,500 per dose. We're working with people to get reimbursement codes and what they professional or experts might recommend, but this is based on other products that I've worked with. And so when you take into consideration the number of imaging modalities that are appropriate with valves, because there's a number of different types of valves, they're implanted in different places. So there's a bit of a distribution of indications under valves, but it's a huge market. And we're estimating about $165 million annually. So the key concept, the thing I really want to stress here, as a chemist, me and my partners have worked together for quite some time now, and on other companies, other drugs, and we always had a philosophy: we will not fail due to CMC issues, and CMC is chemistry, manufacturing, and controls. These are things you control that you manipulate as a chemist. The things you can't control are toxicology and efficacy. Now you can go back and tweak and make changes to address those things, but most of the time when things fail going from preclinical to clinical, it's because of efficacy or toxicology. And I've a long history in oncology, and the classic story is we've solved cancer in mice many times. It's just the transition to humans is sometimes nebulous. So in our case, our preclinical model, again, we take these devices out of human patients. So a patient presents at the medical school because they're having issues with their LVAD pump. We take that pump from them. We take it and implant it in a calf. It's a good model based on size, blood volume, flow, all these things. And we acquire data using that human pump with human clots. So it is really as close to actual clinical data as you can get in a preclinical model. Furthermore, it's a nuclear imaging agent. So the amount of material that you dose is exquisitely small. And so there's very little tox concern. We have in fact done a GMP toxicology study and have demonstrated that there is no tox, but even the FDA recognizes that because there is so little material, you're only required to do a single species of tox. So fibrosint has been really heavily de-risked in both of these factors. So who are we competing against? In the case of prosthetic valves, again, the competition is the current standard of care, and we walked into this space. This is actually a bit of a pivot for us because the physicians at the med school here came to us and said, look, we need better tools. They're using TEE and TTE. This is transesophageal echocardiography and transthoracic echocardiography. Multi-detector computed tomography. These aren't words that are typically people throw around, but basically you do TEE first. If it looks like there may be something there, you follow up with these other two imaging modalities, and collectively it generates enough data for you to say, you know what, I think there's an issue, and we're going to treat it, as opposed to fibrosint, which binds exquisitely, specifically, and tightly. And if you get an image, you know that it's thrombus. Now, thrombus is pretty critical here because even if you get positive results with these three techniques in the top bullet, you don't know whether it's thrombus, which is blood clot, or pannus, which is the growth of tissue over these devices. And the only way to diagnose that is to actually surgically go in and look at the device. And these are already patients that are somewhat fragile. The treatment is drastically different depending on which of these it is. And so it's a critical thing to be able to assess that in an ex vivo fashion as opposed to going in and doing surgery. For LVADs, there is no competition. It's completely unmet need. There's an academic group in Boston that is working on a similar product. They've published with it. They're using positron emission tomography. We're using a single photon emission. It's beyond the scope of this presentation, but the single photon is a much more common imaging modality. The cameras are a factor of 10 cheaper. The radioisotopes are much cheaper and much more readily available. So we think it's a much better, more universal approach. This is the team here at Capella Imaging. That's myself, Greg Lonza, who was one of the founders. He's a cardiologist at the med school. Bill McGee and Grace. Enough about us. I really want to stress the medical advisors. This is just a world-class group of people. In fact, the annual meeting of the Society of Nuclear Medicine and Molecular Imaging is in Chicago next weekend. It starts. And these two people on the left, Barry Siegel and Sally Schwartz, both have symposia named after them, honorary symposia named after them as part of this meeting. And it's an award that is given each year to who's done the most significant research and progress in this field. They are wonderful people. Their experience is tremendous. Greg Ewald drives the heart transplant and the heart failure program at the med school. Thomas Schindler is an expert in SPECT imaging with a focus on cardiovascular disease. The Washington University Medical School owns the intellectual property. We have the exclusive license to using it. And we've actually made improvements to the molecule itself that will allow us to extend the patent because once the changes we have made will kind of block out the original molecule. We did a Series A about 2 years ago with North Star Medical Radioisotopes. They invested $1 million in it straight out of the door. And that drove our pre-IND, enabling work. So we've done all of the preclinical toxicology. We've developed a scalable GMP process. We have biodistribution. All of this is done. We're ready to go to the clinic. So we're looking for a $1.5 million investment that we'd like to close Q3 of this year, following with $3.5 million early next year. That will get us through phase 1. Another $5 million, probably the end of 24, early 25, will get us through phase 2. Our key opinion leaders all tell us that it is unlikely the FDA will ask for a phase 3 trial because it is a nuclear imaging agent. Again, the rules are a little different. It's a binary response, so you don't have to have these huge patient sets to demonstrate a suitable p-value. And that's it. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thanks, James. We have time for one question from each. Katie, what's your question?
Yeah, so if I understood this correctly, you're still in the testing phase. So what's your estimated timeline to getting this into the clinic?
Oh, goodness. No, we've contracted with a spectacular organization that focuses on nuclear imaging. We are we've requested the pre-IND meeting. We stopped to pivot because we are including both LVADs and prosthetic valves in our original indication. So we are requesting the pre-IND meeting now. And as soon as we get the green light on our plan, we will submit the IND and go into the clinic. We're ready to go. We kind of need the funds to fuel the journey, but we're ready to go.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. And Yoko, what's your question?
Yep, sure. You're talking about sort of how your team is stacked and of course your advisors. But when you think about the skills and perspectives you need at the table to make this successful, what do you think are the key things that your team has? And then what are the things that you still need to bring on board?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the key things we have are, we've been through this so many times and solved problems. There is absolutely no question in my mind that we can successfully produce a drug and get it to market. We have a lot of outstanding help that we contract out in terms of regulatory affairs and quality assurance. The piece that we probably need the most in is, when it comes to being a really good business person, I'm a great chemist. So, we're really looking for partners at this point that will come in and step up and not just invest, but we would like somebody that wants to be a partner with us and help drive this and bring that business acumen that we can. It's kind of where we're weak right now.
Great. Well, that brings us to the end of our time. Thanks so much, James, for your presentation and the good questions there, Katie and Yoko. Let's bring our final presenter up. This is Jeff Missling of Spinterra. Jeff, you can go ahead and share your slides. We'll go ahead and kick you off here in a moment.
All right, wonderful. Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Jeff Missling here, founder and CEO at Spinterra. Excited to present to the audience today. Spinterra, as our name would imply, we are working in the area of back pain, and everyone is probably familiar with back pain. It is the largest area of direct healthcare spending in the United States at $135 billion a year. To put that in context, we spend about $125 billion on all forms of cancer and $90 billion on the treatment of heart disease. So back pain consumes more healthcare dollars than any other segment of healthcare. The treatments today have multiple shortcomings. One of the main treatments that patients would receive is an epidural steroid injection. We do 10 million of these a year in the United States, but the outcomes of the drugs that are available for that procedure are just unacceptably poor. And I'll tell you more about that in our presentation today. We've created a much better drug for this application that has a $2 billion market potential in the United States. We've got data from a phase 2 proof of concept, a randomized controlled clinical trial that demonstrates that our drug is meaningfully better when it comes to performance compared to the current drugs which are being used off-label today, and performs meaningfully better than any of the drugs that are in clinical development against this, of which there are 4. We've got amazing support from key opinion leaders in the field. You can see a couple quotes here on my title slide. I expect adoption of Spinterra's SX600 to be near uniform. Fits perfectly into the needs of the patient, doctor, and the payer. So the KOLs in this field who are really guiding the future of pain management are extremely excited about the potential of our drug as well. Our drug is built on our in-house proprietary technology platform that we call a microsuspension. And what this technology provides is 90 days of sustained release of the active pharmaceutical ingredient right at the site of injection. And it can be injected at an extremely high concentration through small needles and catheters, which really differentiates it in the field. And this technology has multiple applications outside of back pain that we would look to move on to at some point in the evolution of Spinterra. However, the opportunity of back pain is so large that that's where we've focused our attention to date. So again, back to the treatment of back pain, as I introduced at the start of my presentation, the outcomes in back pain are not very good right now. Patients often start out with oral medications, physical therapy, or simply waiting. If their pain persists, most patients would move on to an epidural steroid injection prior to receiving surgery or expensive electrostimulation devices. So what is this epidural steroid injection? It's just simply a cortisone shot, an injection of an anti-inflammatory agent in the cortisone family into the epidural space, which is a layer of fat just outside your spinal cord. And this is targeting an inflamed nerve root, which would often provide lumbar radicular pain or sciatica resulting from a herniated disc in your lumbar spine. And again, as I introduced earlier on, only about 1/3 of the patients receive adequate pain relief from an epidural steroid injection of the existing drugs that are available today. And even then, that efficacy is short-term. About 2/3 of patients will receive a second injection within 60 days of their initial treatment. So clearly there's an opportunity for better outcomes. That brings us to our lead asset that we call SX600. So SX600, again, is a sustained release formulation of dexamethasone. And again, we chose dexamethasone for this application because it's the drug that doctors associate with safety in this field today. So we took that active ingredient, formulated it into our sustained release microsuspension technology. This provides long-term exposure of the active ingredient right at the site of injection. And let me show you what that looks like. So on this slide, we're comparing the pharmacokinetic or PK profile of the dexamethasone that doctors are using off-label today for epidural injection. That's the blue line here. You can see a 10 milligram injection of that drug provides a huge spike in the concentration right after injection, and it's cleared out of the body in less than 2 days. We can provide a 2.5 times higher dose, cut that peak exposure down by about a factor of 10, but then provide the slow, steady exposure out to 90 days, again, after that single injection. So our hypothesis was that this would translate into significantly improved outcomes, which our clinical data now demonstrates. So last year, we completed a phase 2 proof of concept clinical trial in Australia. We enrolled 56 patients in this study. We had a saline placebo control arm, a low dose and a high dose of our sustained release SX600 formulation. And we followed these patients for 180 days after a single epidural injection. The primary outcome measure was the proportion of patients who achieved 50% or greater pain relief from their baseline pain score, which is highly clinically relevant in the area of back pain. And you can see at our pre-specified 60-day primary endpoint, a full 71% of the patients in our high dose group hit that mark, compared to only 13% in the placebo group. And that response rate in the high dose patients was maintained at 64% or higher through the 180-day follow-up period from a single epidural injection. Let's look at the market here again in back pain. I mentioned how large it was. If you look at the area of epidural steroid injections for the treatment of back pain, there's existing procedure codes that doctors are using to be reimbursed for this procedure. And those are stratified by the lumbar and cervical spine, the upper and lower spine, and some details around the route of administration, transforaminal versus interlaminar. Our clinical development program is focused on the largest segment of that market, the lumbar sacral transforaminal epidural injections. That's where 58% of the existing procedures are performed. So that leaves us with 5.8 million procedures already being done in the United States with drugs that are off-label and have poor outcomes. Our technology has the potential to eliminate 40% of those repeat injections that are done in the first 90 days of treatment, leaving us with 3.5 million procedures in the United States. At a reasonable price for a branded product in this area of $600 per dose, that imputes a $2 billion market potential for our product. Again, we're assuming, based on interviews of some KOLs in this space, a market share of 50%, which provides peak sales of our product at just over the $1 billion mark. I mentioned briefly in our opening that we have some competition in this space. So there are 4 other pharmaceutical companies that have identified the unmet need in this area. We are the only company with a 90-day long-acting sustained release formulation of a proven active ingredient. All the others either have much shorter acting technologies that are really not differentiated from the generic drugs being used off-label today, or they're testing an active ingredient that is unproven in this area. So a much higher risk development program. Let's turn quickly here to the company. So prior funding, we've actually raised $30 million in the history of the company. 50% of that has been non-dilutive financing, mainly from the Department of Defense, who's provided $7 million in grants. And that's because back pain is a leading cause of disability and injury amongst actively deployed military personnel. Earlier in the history of the company, we also did an option to acquire agreement with an opioid manufacturer that provided us with an $8 million option fee, which is effectively non-dilutive financing. That company had to walk away from that agreement due to bankruptcy that preceded or followed their opioid litigation. So that company, Purdue Pharma, has no rights or any special rights to our technology, but again, provided us with $8 million of non-dilutive capital. So we feel like our valuation is in really good shape based on that funding history, with a post-money valuation on our last round of $31 million. Again, we have a very strong IP portfolio, 6 patents in the United States, multiple patents issued around the world that include composition of matter claims. And there's a nuance here in this area of pharmaceuticals. there's no pathway within the FDA to achieve approval of a generic equivalent of a locally acting sustained release drug. It's never been done. It never will be done. That regulatory pathway just does not exist. So for that reason, the only competition we ever expect is from other branded pharmaceutical products. I'll highlight on our team that we have the leadership in place ready to execute the next stage of development of our drug, including our Chief Medical Officer, Lee Techner, with 22 years of drug development, largely focused in the area of pain management. We've got some notable pharmaceutical executives on our board: Doug Drysdale, who's the CEO of Cybin, John Foster, who's the president of Cerebral Therapeutics, and some of the top KOLs in pain management on our medical advisory board, notably Tim Deere and David Mock. So today we're offering a $5 million convertible note round. The main use of proceeds for that round is the execution of a mini pig epidural toxicology study that the FDA has requested we conduct, in addition to the already canine and rat epidural toxicology studies that were previously completed. The terms of the note: 10% interest, has a valuation cap of $24 million, which you'll note is about 25% lower than the post-money valuation on our last round. So we're trying to be aggressive here and reflect the conditions of the market. And we're taking $50,000 minimum investments. Of course, everyone wants to talk about exit scenarios. The next stage of development for our drug is a phase 3 clinical trial that would be the basis of approval. Once we're into that phase 3 clinical trial, that opens up opportunities for licensing and partnership deals with pharmaceutical companies, which I think is our most likely path to exit. Again, here's that timeline to FDA approval. Again, the use of proceeds from this bridge round is a mini pig tox study, and that will be followed by a much larger funding round, hopefully in partnership with a mid to large size pharma company, to complete the single clinical trial that remains before we can submit our drug for FDA approval. And Hall, with that, I would take the audience's questions.
Great. Let's start with Yoko first. What's your first question, Yoko?
Sure. Given the amount of funding you've raised, what are you looking for in this particular current tranche in terms of your investors and the types of skills and perspectives and kind of resources that they need to bring for you?
Well, since we're targeting a $5 million round, we're really thinking it's most likely going to be high net worth individuals, family offices, maybe some smaller VCs have also expressed some interest. So I think what we'd be looking for there, which would be a win-win, would be, connections into larger organizations that might be able to support us down the road. However, I really think that we've got that covered with our board of directors. So Yoko, I don't mean to sound crass, but really the main thing we're seeking is access to capital. I think our board provides the expertise we need and the connections we need to secure that larger funding down the road.
Great. And Katie, what's your question?
Yeah, Jeff, I was going to ask you, did you go through the CPN process in the past?
No, we have not. Okay.
I thought you might have, but I would recommend you applying. I think this is something our group could be interested in, and we kind of fit, right where you're at with your fundraising round. Don't have a lot of questions for you. Mine also was in the same realm as Yoko's with, it seems like everything is on the right track. You guys are doing great. So what's the biggest challenge that you are having? Is it really just capital? Or, how can we be helpful?
Yeah, it's the funding environment for pharma biotech right now. I mean, I was at JP Morgan earlier this year. We had just received our clinical trial results. Everyone seemed to be quite negative there about, funding kind of mid-stage clinical development assets. I was at Bio last week in Boston. I had almost 30 partnering meetings there with pharmaceutical companies spanning the globe. And I felt like the sentiment was quite a bit more upbeat. And really, I just know it's going to take some time to get a deal done with a strategic partner, right? And that's why we're out raising this $5 million convertible note round. We're anxious to get this mini pig study started and underway. And in the background, we're working on a much larger funding deal that would support that phase 3 clinical trial. So its access to capital is crucial. And what you can see with SpineThera is it actually would be most capital efficient to complete our phase 3 development program inside of a established pharmaceutical company, right, that would already have commercial operations, marketing, pharmacovigilance, all those things. So I really think a strategic partnership is the most logical next step for us. But again, we're motivated to get this mini pick tox study started as soon as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one piece of advice that I'm giving to all founders is go look for the angel groups that invest in, the vertical that you're building a company in, because most of the angel groups in the country are still very active, even though some VC contributions have fallen. So I would recommend CTAN, and then once one angel group gets behind you, we like to syndicate deals with other groups, so potentially they pass it along to someone else. So I would try to figure out which one is the best fit for you, and or just apply to all of them and see, what hits.
Absolutely. We will definitely reach out. Thank you, Katie.
Great. Well, that brings us to the end of our presentations today. I want to thank Yoko Okano and Katie Russell for sitting on the panel and asking great questions. And I want to thank our presenters as well. Y'all did a great job with that. And we'll be back in touch with those other introductions we can make for those in the audience through the polls and the outreach that we'll do as well. With that, we'll go ahead and close it out for today, and appreciate everybody taking time, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.